Hi everybody and welcome back. It has been a couple weeks now since my last video. I've just been cranking through watching different shows, getting caught up on reading a lot of different manga, and just really going from there. I had some weather here, so just kind of took some time off, played some games, tried to relax, been dealing with some back problems, but that's neither here nor there, not anything for you to worry about really. So we're going to just move on. I decided to put out a quick video. This one is not about seasonal anime, as I'm still kind of working my way through. I've reviewed most of my first impressions for the shows that I've been watching, the new IPs anyway. And probably here within the next week or two, I'm going to try and put out a video talking about the continuing series that I'm watching. However, I'm going to do something a little bit different this time around. This is going to be, I'm going to call it a manga release, but technically this is more of a manhwa release because it's a Korean webcomic. Which is going to be Solo Leveling. Now, most people know about this. The anime from A1 is currently airing. We are a couple episodes in, and I mentioned that I wasn't super impressed with the anime. There's nothing wrong with it, just knowing that it was coming from A1 and knowing their past work, I felt that it was a little lackluster, but that didn't really have anything to do with the story. Now, the story of Solo Leveling is basically, I described it in the other episode, but I will mention it here, is that we are in a world where dungeons have started springing up around in the real world, and people known as hunters are granted powers to go in and dive these dungeons. Now, I will say that there may be spoilers, there will definitely be spoilers within this video, so if you do not want to hear them, that is completely fine. Just go ahead and if you want, go watch some of my other videos. But with that getting out of the way, I'm just going to deep dive into this because I recently finished the manhwa. I made it all the way through, and actually the only thing I have left now are a few of the side stories. So I have completed from the beginning to the end of the main story. Alright, now the main story, we follow Hunter Sung-Jin Woo, as he is known to be the weakest hunter in recorded history. Now, if anyone has watched the anime or read the manhwa, we're all very aware of that. Now, however, he manages to stumble into a double dungeon, a dungeon that once cleared, there is another part to it. They are unaware of the rating of said dungeon, yet they all vote to go in anyway. So the thing being there is they all get trapped in this and so on and so forth. He is basically left there as sacrifice as all of the other hunters are either killed or escape. Now, like I said, here come the spoilers. He does not die. He manages to survive the timer countdown in the actual dungeon room itself, and right before he is about to die, he is presented with a prompt letting him know that he is about to die unless he decides to become a player. He is the only person in the universe designated as a player, and he decides to accept it. Now, when he accepts it, he awakens in a hospital completely healed. Now, by completely healed, I mean he's not missing any limbs, which he most certainly was prior to the revival. He also had many mortal wounds. They've all been completely healed. Not only that, he actually has a floating prompt screen in front of him, giving him various quests, including daily quests on which he must complete, otherwise he receives a penalty. Now, I mentioned that the story, I mentioned in my other video that the story was not particularly anything unique, and that is true. It is basically an isekai without the other world, although the other world is kind of there. It's not really a reverse, it's an isekai plotline in the real world. Now, this is not necessarily a bad thing, because it is done very well. The manhwa is very, very entertaining. The story is, I want to say cringe, because it comes off as cringe. It's a massive power fantasy where, yes, you are rooting for the main character, but at the same time, he is completely unstoppable from beginning to basically end. So it does feel very much like a power fantasy, like a lot of isekai's tropes tend to be, only ratcheted to the extreme, where basically nobody can touch him. He is godlike very, very early on. Um, However, so going back on into this, so he is E rank when he is first basically becomes a hunter status when he is awakened, after he agrees to the player moniker. He basically is the only person who is able to level up and gain experience. So whereas this, for most people, get just powers handed to them of varying levels and abilities, they are all level capped. They cannot get any stronger. They can obviously improve skills by training in the same way that anybody else would, but nothing really affects the powers that they have. He is the only one that can exponentially increase his power, and much, much later into the series, we find out that he really doesn't have a level cap. He can just keep going. Now, before I get too deep dive into this, I will say, I'd like to say a rest in peace to Dubu, Jang Sung-rak, who was the original illustrator for Solo Leveling. He died July 23rd, 2022, after suffering from a cerebral hemorrhage before everything was completed. He was the one who did the webtoon adaptation of Solo Leveling. I know that he was greatly missed during the project. So I just wanted to come out and say that just randomly. It's a lot of stuff. I know most people probably know, some people don't, but I would like to state that before I get further into this video. All right, so now continuing on with that after the sad thing is out of the way. So I'm not going to get into too many fine, in-depth portions of this, as I do feel that it is something that is meant to be read and enjoyed. The artwork is quite good. It's a little smooth for my taste. That's not necessarily bad. That's just a different art style compared to Japanese manga. It feels like a cross between manga and American comics, whereas the artwork is very smooth. It's not lacking detail, but a lot of the texture lines that are used in manga are missing in this manhwa, which is fine. It's just a style that I'm not particularly used to, so I cannot say if that is a normal style for Korean manhwas, as I have not, outside of this one, I have not delved into that. This is actually my first now, whereas I have watched a lot of anime based off of them, such as Tower of God, God of High School, and obviously Solo Leveling. But it is not something that I'm super familiar with. That being said, the artwork is very, very well done. There's not any negative things that I can say there. I will say that I did find it very amusing where there are whole 20 to 30 page spreads where there are no words. It is just pure action scenes. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I actually don't dislike that remotely. I just thought it was kind of amusing. But as far as the story goes, I want to say that everything could kind of be guessed all the way up until the very end of the actual story itself. Not necessarily bad. Like I said, it's a premise that's been done time and time again in different settings. So basically, the hero, Sung Jin-woo, just consistently becomes more and more overpowered. We start to learn about his background, how his father was a hunter and went missing in the dungeons, how his mother is suffering from a disease known as the eternal sleep, which seems to be connected to people who are weak to mana, being around hunters who have a large amount of mana, so they basically go into a coma. So a large portion of his diving is to support the hospital bills for his mother and to support his sister, since his father is missing and presumed dead. Towards the end of it, we do tend to find out that there is a whole lot of backstory with some ultra-powered, more or less, demons, and then we also have some angels. They're called other things within this, but that's more or less what we can look at. I do want to say that I found large portions of this story to basically pull from biblical stories. So there's an entire story about the Shadow Monarch being one of the most powerful characters who used to be on the side of good, then turned to evil, and was cast aside by the ultimate evil, and then pushed down to rule over basically hell, which I feel kind of mimics the biblical story of Lucifer turning against God and whatnot and being cast down. So I found part of this to have a lot of biblical allegories behind it. Once again, not bad. A lot of stories do this, including The Matrix. So it's a pretty common theme. I did find that kind of humorous as I noticed it as I was going through the story and I started reading about the Shadow Monarch. Being cast out by his creator and basically just usurping everything. But actually only usurping because he was looking out for the good of everybody. So, but anyway, getting back to it, Sung Jin Woo consistently just gets more and more powerful, completing more and more quests as he goes through more RPG trope dungeons, large cities. We get a ton of tertiary characters that are next to pointless. They are touched on and then either murdered or just forgotten. There are a small cast of side characters that they do focus on for a little bit just to add some spice to the story, but they are not particularly fully fleshed out characters. We do get some more fleshing out of those characters, however, in the post-story side stories, which was a nice little thing to see. Whereas we get the love interest, takes quite a bit to actually kick in. She is mentioned. She is Hunter Cha, Cha Hai-in. My apologies, I'm not used to Korean names, so if I'm butchering any of these pronunciations, I do truly apologize. She is an S-rank hunter in South Korea who actually has heightened smell senses, and she is hinted as a love interest when she says he smells good, because apparently everyone smells bad to her because of her heightened senses. However, the love story there is pushed out of the main storyline into the side stories, so you don't get much outside of some little hinting and teasing here through the main story, as the main story is primarily focused on Sung Jin Woo protecting humanity from the monarchs. So the monarchs are basically super strong. They're basically demon lords, kind of. They are caught up in a constant battle between... The monarchs are caught up in a constant battle between themselves and the rulers. The rulers are basically your angels who have actually killed God, more or less. I'm just going to phrase it that way because that's the way that makes the most sense. There is an ultimate creator who created the rulers and the monarchs. However, the main creator was constantly having battles between the rulers and the monarchs to supply souls, I guess you would say, and they were destroying whole worlds. The rulers did not like constantly being on the battlefield, so they turned around and killed the creator, and they themselves also basically became horrible and were trying to find ways to stop the endless streams of battle between the monarchs and the rulers, because the monarchs are inherently bad. The rulers are not inherently bad, but they're just kind of misguided And the Shadow Monarch, who Sung basically is slowly more or less becoming, is the most powerful monarch who also used to be a ruler, but he was cast down. But yes, so the main premise of it eventually becomes the Battle of Sung Jin Woo, going up against all of the monarchs, finding out about himself and the system that he is playing into, and how it was created, and how it connects to the Shadow Monarch. This part is very, very interesting, if not a little convoluted. Obviously, my explanation of it is probably also a little convoluted. But basically, we have rulers, angels, monarchs, demons. The rulers are trying to protect the human race, doing a very piss poor job of it. The monarchs are trying to kill all of the humans, also to stop the battling. So they're both going about the exact same thing in different ways. But the rulers keep failing in this, so they keep basically rewinding time, using a goblet that they drink out of to reset it. So the world has already ended multiple times. We don't get into really any of that outside of the large-scale battle that we see as a memory in Sung Jin Woo after he takes down the architect. The architect is the one who basically has set all of this into play with the help and power of the Shadow Monarch, who just wants everybody to get along, basically. So we have a lot of large-scale battles. We have a lot of Sung leveling up. You get to see a lot of these tertiary hunter characters. The American ones, there are some German ones brought in. I believe a Chinese one is brought in, and we get to meet a lot of these tertiary characters for small little things here and there. The character designs are great. They're fantastic. I think a lot of the characters are just brought in to kind of show off some interesting little powers here and there as a little bit of world building, which is actually done quite well. I have no problems with that, but a lot of the characters are basically murked off pretty quickly, and we don't hear or see from them again outside of some ultra high level S-ranked hunters, and we only really get a couple of them are really have any semblance of story outside of just mentioning that they're super powerful, which is fine. The main premise here is we're watching Hunter Sung go through and basically try to save the world, and basically at the very end of the story sacrifice himself to basically reset time once again. So here's where we get into super spoiler territory. So basically Sung goes through and does actually annihilate all of the monarchs. He actually tricks the dragon monarch, who is basically the only one remaining, who is the most powerful monarch outside of the shadow monarch. They're kind of on even territory, kind of mutually assured destruction between both of them, as Sung has basically become the Shadow Monarch at the end of the story. And he tricks the Dragon Monarch, and whereas Sung has basically summoned the rulers into this plane to help him end the Dragon Monarch. So once that happens, they say, hey, this is basically the first time we've ever had the world not, fall completely apart, humanity not gonna die out. So we're gonna kind of stick with this one. And Sun goes, no, 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 no. I'm gonna go ahead and hit the goblet one more time. However, don't send anybody to this plane of existence. Instead, send me into the alternate dimension. And they're like, everybody's gonna come back to life. All the bad guys are gonna come back to life. They're all gonna remember what happened. Are you sure you want to do this? You won't have anyone to help you. He goes, that's fine. He goes, I've lost too many people. So basically the end of the story is more or less he sacrifices himself. He resets the world. Everyone rewinds time back before Hunter started awakening. And he basically banishes himself into this alternate dimension where all of the monarchs and the monsters and everything exist. And he just goes through by himself with his shadow army that he has accrued throughout the entire manhwa, which is actually one of the most interesting, cool parts is how he acquires his shadow army. And and he just wipes everything out so that he can protect the peace of everybody that he had met throughout that basically time loop. Um, and basically therein lies the end of the main story. So we do get into the side stories after that. I'm not all the way through the side stories, but I am aware that basically Sung Jin-woo comes back into the world. So at the end of the story, he rewinds time, and he is actually existing in this world that he is rewound. He is there for a very short period of time. I can't remember what age he goes up to, living with his father, his mother, and his sister peacefully until the point where all the hunters would have been awakened. He leaves them a note saying, "I'm going to be gone for a little while. I'll be back when I'm done with what I have to do." And then he is gone for 2 years. So that's 2 years by normal standard time. The alternate dimension goes a little bit different on time scale. When he eventually does come back after completing his mission, he has been gone in that world for, I believe, 25 or 27 years. So he can no longer really age. He has to actually use magic to change his appearance because he doesn't age due to the Shadow Monarch's powers and basically just being an overpowered god at this point. And that's where the side stories kind of begin. We get to see a lot of him growing up, trying, running into people that he knew in the original time loop of the main story. He sees them in a different time loop as younger people. Some he interacts with in high school or middle school or high school, and some are already adults, so he gets to interact with some of them. And we start seeing some of the memories leach back in, or him remembering certain things. And it's that part of world building I was actually quite impressed with. You almost did an entire full loop of where these characters from the main part of the series are just kind of touched upon, and then once we get to the side stories, they get a lot more to them, and I thought that was actually very, very well done. So overall, I want to say that I actually was really ultimately kind of impressed with it. I mean, as a starting point for manhwa, yeah, this is going to be like the most, I think this one's been rated #1 forever now. And I just kind of held off on it. There was no real reason why. I just don't generally read webcomics. I generally have tons of manga volumes and things like that. But I was intrigued by the story. And like I said, the story is nothing incredibly unique. If you read a lot of manga, it's something where as you go through, you're like, okay, cool. I'm familiar with a lot of these concepts. The way that it is done is really, really good. The biblical allegory I could have done without. Not my thing, but an interesting take on that kind of story. And I thought that was overall also fairly well done. The art, while not my exact taste, beautifully done. No real faults, like I said, just not usually the style that I tend to go for. I'm used to the hyper stylized, black and white, and this is all full color. So yeah, there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. It's very interesting. It's very, very good. I highly recommend it. To me, it's not an intro story because there are some intricacies within it that are kind of told circularly. There's a lot of stuff going on, but it's not a super cerebral story. But it's something I think that, if you're used to American comics or if you've dabbled in manga, it's something that's going to be fairly easy to read. And for people that are well versed in those areas, you've probably already read it. But if not, definitely check it out. It's isekai light. I guess that's the easiest way to look at it. It's not an isekai because they're bringing certain, he does go to another world from time to time, but also parts of that world come to this one from time to time. I guess the easiest, urban fantasy. We'll call urban fantasy. Think Persona. Kind of that where the worlds are kind of here and there connected in ways. I think that's the best way to describe it. It would be an urban fantasy, and definitely a really good one. I highly recommend it. And that's Solo Leveling. There's tons of content out for it right now. I do know that there is another outside of the main Solo Leveling storyline. They also have the Solo Leveling side stories part of the web novel manhwa. Then there's also there's also the webtoon version, which I'm not familiar with. I've not really messed with any webtoons. There is also a RPG game that's supposedly in development right now. We have the A1 anime that is currently out now, and on top of that there is a Korean drama adaptation in development and a spin-off webtoon called Solo Leveling Ragnarok that is supposed to come out later this year. So tons of media for you to jump into. I know I think I completed, because I read it in chapters, I think I blazed through like 90 chapters in an afternoon. So, I mean, it's a pretty quick read, especially the fact that there are a lot of extended fight scenes where it's just blurs of color. So if you're reading it for the story, you can make it through fairly quickly. If you're reading it for the art, that might take you a little bit longer. But definitely check it out. I didn't imagine I'd sit down and have almost nearly half an hour video talking about solo leveling. I just wanted to bring up some of the points of that I thought while I was reading it. It was enjoyable. I killed through most of it in an afternoon. But yeah, no, it was definitely an enjoyable. If you're looking for a good power fantasy, if you're looking for a way to break into Korean manhwa, if you're just looking for an action RPG story where a guy just gets more and more powerful to crush all his enemies, but still remains a good, kind person that actually looks after people, this is a good one to check out. All right, but with that said, my back's starting to hurt. As you can see, it's hard to breathe. I'm going to end this video today. Hopefully get it edited and pushed out fairly soon. But yeah, solo leveling, check it out. When with that, watch more anime, read more manga or manhwa, and have a good one, guys.